Our next guest on West Coast Live is a family physician. She practices also Western and Chinese herbal medicine, breathing techniques, nutritional therapies, orthobiotomy, and biodynamic osteopathy. And she practices in Albany, Berkeley area. She's meditated every day since she was 16 years old. And in the tradition of physician heal thyself, she had to deal with anxiety. And she has found ways to deal with her own anxieties. She's utilized herbal medicines for over 35 years and teaches at various conferences about natural health and animals and the connection that we humans have with the natural world. Her books include Transforming the Nature of Health, a holistic vision of healing that honors our connection to Earth and ourselves and others. And the new one, Freedom from Anxiety. Pre-orders available now, coming out in January of the new year. Please welcome Dr. Marcey Shapiro. Recognize the music Mike played?
Yes, I do.
Takes a worried woman to sing a worried song. So what is anxiety?
That's a great question. Anxiety can be a lot of things, but I think essentially anxiety is the inability to be at peace in the present moment. And that encapsulates many different forms of anxiety. So if you look at the medical definition, there's 6 major types of anxiety. But really it comes down to that discomfort in your own skin and one's own ease. Yeah.
Are you feeling anxious at the moment?
You know, actually, surprisingly, I'm not feeling all that anxious.
Oh, good.
Yeah, the first time I was on your show, I was much more anxious. But this time I've been feeling pretty mellow.
Oh, good. Then did you take any herbs before you came in?
It's mostly the breathing techniques and the meditation, yeah. And did work earlier today and just got into a very peaceful state, yeah.
I know the importance of breathing when feeling anxious. I was once being swept out to sea in Hawaii, and I needed to get somebody to rescue me, and I knew that if I panicked, I would sink. And I remembered some breathing exercises, and it slowed my breathing down, and I was able to tread water, but I could just feel that I was on the verge of this, like it would be almost like a physical collapse, the anxiety can be so bad.
Yeah, that can be a panic attack where people feel like they're dying, and in fact, many times, more often when people go to the emergency room and they feel like they're having a heart attack, they're actually more often having panic attacks or anxiety attacks. So heart attacks are only diagnosed perhaps 20% of the time when people go to the emergency room, and panic attacks are over twice that.
How would we know the difference between sort of ordinary anxiety and a panic attack?
Well, a lot of the physical symptoms are the same. The pulse races, you start sweating, there can be nausea. So I think partly it's experience. Usually it takes some learning. So I have patients who've learned that they actually have panic attacks and they feel the symptoms starting to rise, and they can do breathing exercises, take a remedy, whatever works for them that we worked on together. But I think initially it's hard to know, and I think often you need somebody outside who has more perspective in the situation, who can reflect to you, okay, this is what's going on for you. So it's about learning about your own balance.
And you need almost, then it sounds like an anxiety buddy in a way to help redress, because I think along with anxiety there can be a misperception of what might be going on. I know there's a phrase, about the worried well. People who are generally in well health, in good health, can worry about something a lot.
Well, that's definitely a lot of the population is the worried well, and they have a lot of different symptoms, and really I think people are often afraid of their bodies and afraid of the physical processes they have, and then the mind starts spinning with worried thoughts about that, and then becomes a tape that people keep playing over and over and over again.
So our mind then can also get into ruts, like we expect a certain feeling. We want to, in some way, do we want to feel a certain way that's familiar to us in some of the situations?
Well, I think we all have mental grooves, and I think part of the challenge with learning to overcome anxiety is to understand that you can make different grooves. So just like water will flow down a similar path over and over and over again, but if you dam that path up, then it'll go down a different path. So if you know that your mind tends to flow towards anxiety, worried thoughts, you can actually retrain it to have calmer thoughts, to drop that, and a lot of that is by bringing yourself into the present moment.
How do you do that?
Well, I do it in a number of ways. One is, a lot of my teachings are about living from the heart, and so I teach a lot of heart-centered breathing exercises. I give a handout on heart-centered breathing exercises to many of my patients, and I have the heart-centered breathing exercises actually in much greater detail in the book, and that is, breathing exercises are a time-honored way to bring people into the present moment. So a simple breathing exercise is to breathe in, imagine the breath coming in through the top of the head and then out through the heart. And it can be done with the eyes open or the eyes closed. And then also to imagine the breath coming in through the heart and out through the stomach, because as Deepak Chopra explained, the gut is really a lot of where the neurotransmitters of emotion are actually made and processed. So you really want to get that balance. You want to start making those calm neurotransmitters, and even though we think of them as brain neurotransmitters, actually more of them are made in the gut than they're actually made in the brain.
Both Deepak Chopra and you have talked about the connection between the physicality of the functions of our body, the way it works, the systems, linking it with kind of a spiritual practice in a way, that our minds can affect our brain chemistry, our well-being, our digestion, our sleep cycles, and vice versa.
Absolutely. So we really have a lot more choice in the matter than we often think we do. And we get habits of thought going, but we can change those, and that can change our physiology. So there's a lot of study now happening on topics like psychoneuroimmunology, where we look at the effects of the thoughts on the emotion and the emotions on our nervous system or on our immune system. And in fact, people who are happier and more calm and more balanced actually will tend to have stronger immune systems and suffer fewer diseases, and just in general be not only happier but healthier as well.
How did we as sort of a contemporary culture get away from some of these lessons, these things that seem to be ancient wisdoms?
I think, that's just the disease of our time, is not being in the present moment. People are very focused on the past or worried about what's about to come, but they're not really being here now with what's happening, so they're not really enjoying their experience. How did that happen? I think it's part of Western civilization. It certainly isn't true in traditional civilization. Native civilizations really look at connection with the present moment as a very important, as an essential part of life. I think we also don't have the connection with the earth, and we don't have the connection with nature that previous generations did. For example, just 100 years ago, most Americans lived rurally, and now less than 1% of Americans live rurally. And often one of my prescriptions for patients is spend more time in nature, go outside, take your shoes off, connect with the earth. Also, there's a whole field called earthing, where people actually connect with the earth. So we are electrically insulated from the earth in ways that no prior generation ever has been. Like our shoes have rubber on the bottom that disconnects us from the electrical connection of the earth. So there's a lot of different factors that contribute to the disconnection, but I think many of them are very easy to remedy.
Well, why not just,
Alprazolam, those are physiologically addictive. They're a little hard to get off of, and they can have long-term ramifications. And the thing about taking drugs is that you're not really dealing with the root of the problem, so you're just kind of masking the symptoms, whereas if you're working with yourself and your own embodiment and your own connection, then you can actually correct the problem. Instead of being somebody who's an anxious person who's taking drugs, you can be a calm person who doesn't need anxiety medications. And I think that that's a superior way of being personally. But I don't judge people. If people want to just take medications and don't want to go down that road, I think everybody gets there eventually.
Gets where?
Gets to a place of inner peace, although, I have a more longer view of it, so it may not be in this lifetime.
There are nutritional supplements, homeopathy, there's body work, there's a way that our body can hold tension, and I think that these are, when we're younger, we feel that we can just sort of power through almost anything, and then at some point our body begins with the wear and tear to say, wait a minute, you need to take better care of me and your psyche along with it.
Yes. In Chinese medicine, there's a concept of something called Jing, and Jing is essence. And when we're born, we're full of essence, and we have no wisdom. Of course, you have sort of infinite wisdom when you're born, too. But you develop wisdom through the journey of life. And part of that journey of life is learning to take care of yourself and to watch over your resources and to care for your body and to care for your mind and to care for your thoughts and to care for your emotional well-being. So that's just a really important, all-inclusive path that one can have.
Somebody needs to tell people, maybe that's you, that like every 10 years you have to kind of like change your regime. In your 20s, you can do this and that and the other thing, but then by your 30s, you need to do a little more yoga and you need to cut back on the alcohol. And then by your 40s, you can still have chocolate cake, but you have to walk 5 miles a day. There's a different kind of rhythm, isn't there, for each decade of life?
Well, there is a different rhythm, but I think the world would really be transformed if meditation and balance were taught in the schools, if people learned the kind of self-awareness and self-confidence that takes. So if that understanding that we need to attend to our body and attend to the wholeness of who we are is taught all along, then we'll have different expressions at different points of life. But basically that inner self-awareness can start to be cultivated early, and it can lead to a really beautiful expression of a life. So yes, you have more energy and vitality, and you would want to do different things. Like, so when I was younger, I was a runner. I was a distance runner. I was never very fast, but I could go really, really far. And I really had no interest in being a runner at all, but I like to take long walks. And just knowing what my own balance is and what my own sense of harmony is a good thing. So yes, we change over time, and we change in the ways that we find balance, but there always is a good way in every life stage to find balance.
Have you found, there must be places in the world where children are taught to meditate in their age, that it is part of a life way?
Well, children are taught in some cultures to have meditation and mindfulness, many traditional cultures. In the Waldorf school system, they teach forms of meditation and inner awareness. That's a school system that came out of the work of Rudolf Steiner. So that even happens in the United States in some place. And I think that it's a wonderful thing for children.
Is there a way that we can be mindful and live in the moment while multitasking? If we can hone our skills that way.
You really can only focus on one thing at a time. And that's one of the things I teach as I'm trying to help people to overcome their anxiety, is like you're either focusing on the thought that's bringing you more anxiety, or you're focusing on something that's bringing you more calm, and you can't really focus simultaneously on them, on two things. And so you can be multitasking, but really you're dividing your attention, and you're not really giving your full attention and your full mindfulness to one thing. So I know it's the way of our world. People are talking to their friend and they're texting and they're playing a game, but really none of it's getting the full attention.
I was struck by the similarities of sort of the great thinkers of the world in being present, of self-awareness, the Greek adage, know thyself, the writings of Deepak Chopra, the writings of Marcey Shapiro, they all kind of, there is a kind of a similar import that in some ways we have to keep hearing it over and over again.
the most important message is about self-love and about compassion and kindness to yourself, and to live in a way that honors yourself. And so I think that is something that people need to be reminded of over and over and over again, because I think we lose sight of that, and particularly in this society where there's a lot of messages in the media which really make us feel like comparing ourselves to one another and comparing ourselves unfavorably, and the way the school system is set up where there's a lot of competition and people feel compared unfavorably, or where many different types of intelligence aren't really recognized in the school system. So, Daniel Goleman talks about all the 30 different kinds of intelligence, and only really 3 of them are valued in the contemporary school system. So a lot of people can start to feel insecurity about who they are. So to be able to build a core of self-love and self-esteem and self-awareness also builds compassion and kindness in our expression and our interaction with other human beings. And I do think it's a timeless message. I think teachers have taught this for generations and will continue to teach it.
Do you remember a particular anxiety attack you had that was really just way out there, that kind of you said, I've really got to pull myself together?
Yes. I do.
Is it something you care to share?
Yeah, I can share it. Yeah, so I was really in a very difficult place in my relationship, and I felt that I wasn't sure if things were going to, continue as they were. And I'm very happy in my relationship, and that was really very disturbing to me, and I really couldn't stop thinking about the things that I didn't want. And I just kept playing that over and over again, and I had to keep stopping myself. And actually, it was during the writing of this book that happened. And I find that's often the case. And so, I want to write a book on digestive disorders, and I'm like, do I really want that? but anyway, so it would be, sometimes it was like once a minute I would have to pull myself back from the anxious thoughts and go to the breathing exercises and go center. And I was sitting out in my yard a lot of the time and meditating. And it took a while. There was days where that was over and over and again. But then eventually it did shift, and I did feel the pattern break, and I did feel things change. And actually things changed, the resolution also came in the relationship at the same time.
And fear is a big part of anxiety.
Fear is a big part of anxiety, and it's fear of things that we don't want. And people will often go to the most catastrophic situation. So for one of my anxieties in the past was worrying about air travel and worrying that my loved one's plane would crash or something like that, which I have absolutely no control over anyway. And so I think that that's really common with anxiety, is people will really tend to catastrophize. And it's good to just remind yourself that it's extremely rare for those kinds of things to happen. But one of the pearls that I want to share about anxiety is, during my worst moments, what I learned to say to myself was, I won't always feel like this. And I knew that was true. I knew I wouldn't always feel like that, and it would be just this lifeline for me. It's like, I feel really bad right now, I feel really horrible, but I won't always feel like that. And there is where the door opens, is I won't always feel like that. And then also just the ability to sit with one's feelings, I think, is really important. You don't always have to run away from them, because if you allow yourself to just acknowledge the feelings, but not keep telling the story over and over again. So I don't have to keep explaining the things I'm worried about to myself, which increases my anxiety. But I say, I feel really anxious right now, I feel really fearful right now. And let go of the details and just breathe and say...
But that also gets to a comfort in a way, that if we have an anxious feeling, we know what our anxiety is. We say, oh yeah, I'm on edge, I'm feeling anxious about it. It's a known feeling. And to sort of shift out of that into a non-anxious state is like a step into the unknown sometimes.
Our natural state is not anxiety. Our natural state is peace and calm.
Really?
Yeah. You look at babies and young children, they're not anxious. They're happy, they're joyful, they're cranky, but it's a learned behavior. And it can come really early on. It can feel like people are always anxious, especially if their family was anxious, and that's kind of the environmental milieu. But no, I think but it's okay. It's okay to take baby steps too. If anxiety feels more comfortable or worry feels more comfortable, then just being with yourself with that and knowing, you can shift it if you're ready is empowering.
Freedom from Anxiety, a holistic approach to emotional well-being by Dr. Marcey Shapiro, and it's coming up from North Atlantic Books in January of the new year. Pre-orders right there. You anxious about book sales?
No, I feel like this book will help a lot of people, and there's just really something for anyone. So, well, not anyone. There's obviously some people who won't like all the holistic metaphors and stuff like that. But there's breathing techniques, there's aromatherapy, there's rocks and crystals, there's flower essences, there's mind-body tools. I mean, there's really so many different things that the book has to offer. There's herbal remedies, there's Chinese herbal remedy, there's self-acupuncture points. And so I feel like there's just really a lot of practical things that people can do, and not everybody is going to want to do all of it.
Self-acupuncture. Yeah. Self-acupuncture or acupressure?
Yes, thank you. Acupressure. Not acupressure. Yeah,
Some body piercing here. Maybe I'll feel better. Okay, is it like that little squeezing that spot between your thumb and your forefinger?
Yeah, so that thought is actually a really great spot for the immune system, but it also can bring energy. Like if you're anxious and all in your head, that can bring energy down. But this one right over here on the pinky wrist, if you go down here, there's a little notch there at the end of the hand where the wrist starts, and so you kind of fall into a hole. And that's a really common point. And a lot of times I'll have patients, I'll say, you can do that in your business meeting. You can just like sit there while you're talking to your boss and press that point, and they don't even need to know what you're doing. So, yeah, so you can do a lot of these in any setting. Same with the breathing exercises too. I mean, you don't have to close your eyes and be meditative. You can do the breathing exercises for 15 seconds if you need to.
What about an effective aromatherapy?
Aromatherapy is a wonderful tool, and there's a lot of really calming scents that really help us to get in touch with our inner peace. And I think the potential for aromatherapy is huge because it really allows us to change our consciousness and change our state of consciousness. And plants have been around for longer than we have, and the chemicals and the scents, the essential oils that they produce are part of the communication system. And we respond to them, so the limbic system, which is a part of the brain, is right next to the olfactory cortex where we process smell. So the processing of smell is very ancient for us, and it really is very tied in for emotion. When you think about it, there's smells that you love and there's smells that you hate, and people feel pretty strongly about various scents. So with aromatherapy, I give a number of suggestions of oils that are often helpful. One that's clary sage is a very calming but also uplifting scent. Sandalwood is a spiritual kind of grounding scent. Lavender is a very popular one that many people like. Rose, etc. You can read my book.
You scratch and sniff pages? By any chance?
Good idea.
Who knows? Maybe you can soak the pages. Freedom from Anxiety, a holistic approach to emotional well-being. Dr. Marcey Shapiro, thank you very much.